Hello and welcome to a new video. My name is Kaylee. I use this channel to talk about what intentional living looks like for me, and I hope that I can give some insight or allow for some reflection on your end about what intentional things you would like to include in yours. So without further ado, let's jump into this book haul. If you've watched any of my previous videos, then you might be wondering, Kaylee, aren't you in a low buy for this year? Yes. Or, Kaylee, aren't you more of a minimalist? Yes. The answer to both of those questions is yes. And I love reading. I love books. But I want to use this haul to also give some tips on how you can take up the hobby of reading for little to no money. Because typically when I see a haul like this, all of these books would have been purchased from either Amazon or another bookstore at full price, brand new. That's not what this is. None of these books were brand new. And actually, some of these books are not even mine to own because of the library. I'm going to do this haul in two parts. If you're just here to see the books, fantastic. But I really wish that you would stick around because I want to just have a conversation about how reading and even owning books doesn't have to be as expensive as it might seem, or as a lot of people in the booktube, bookstagram, book talk space may make it seem to be. So the first part of this haul are these books right here, all of which came from the library except for this book on top, which is being loaned to me and my husband from a coworker of his at work. I love our local library. They have so many different cool events for the community, plus tons of books. I think, if I remember correctly, I've read 24 books so far this year, and 20 of them came from the library. Most of them digitally through the Libby app, which I'll talk more about later, but these, I think, are the first books that we've checked out since the beginning of the year. The first book is The Reason I Jump, which is by Naoki Higashida. This is a book about a 13-year-old boy with autism and gives a bit of a glimpse into the mind of a young boy with autism. I'm very excited to read this. I know my husband is very excited to read this, and it was completely free because it's loaned to us by a friend. Then we have our library books. So 3 of them my husband checked out and 3 of them I checked out. Just as a frame of reference, each of us saved about $90 based on what our library said would have been the total cost to pay for these books. We each saved about $90, so $180 total. First up is The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty, and my husband checked this book out. He is a little over halfway through, maybe more like 75% through. Wow, he's been reading a lot. And he is really, really loving this, and I am hoping to read it after he is finished as well. I'll be honest, I don't know a lot of what it's about, but that's what I love about the library too. You can pick up things that you might not ordinarily pick up if you were having to pay for them and just give it a try and see if you like it. Then I have Now I Rise, which is one that I checked out. The author is Kirsten White. I read And I Darken, which is the first book of this trilogy last year, and I liked it okay, but I didn't love it, and so I kept forgetting to go and pick up the second book, and now I have it, but I'm hoping once I jump back into this kind of world that she's created, I will start enjoying it more than I remember enjoying the first book. Next is How the King of Elflame Learned to Hate Stories by Holly Black. I adore Holly Black. I adore the Folk of the Air series in general, and these are actually books that I really hope to own one day, but I don't want to spend that much money on books right now, and so I read this one through the local library. It's a gorgeous book as well. Inside there are some illustrations and some different artwork that made this really lovely to read physically, and it's why I would kind of like to own a physical version of this book and the trilogy that precedes it. If you're into fae fantasy, I highly suggest picking up some of Holly Black's books because it's a very different perspective on the fae and fairy. It's a much darker look into the fae and fairy world, and I really appreciate the way that she storytells. Then we have They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. I know nothing about this book. This was one actually my husband picked up. And when he carried it over to the counter, I was like, oh my gosh, I need to read that too, because it's been on my list for a while. I have not read any reviews. I have not read any synopsis. I don't want it. I just want to dive into this book. So very excited to give this a read soon. Then we have Bitter Blue by Kristen Kishore. This is the third book in the Graceling series. There are 2 books, I believe, after this one. And I have read this before. I've read Graceling, Fire, and Bitter Blue, which are the first 3. And I wanted to read the next 2, but I kind of wanted to jump back into the universe from the start. So last year I read Graceling and Fire, and this year I'm back with these characters to pick up Bitter Blue. I don't remember. I think I rated this fairly low the first time that I read it, but I don't remember why. I think I read all 3 of them back to back to back, and I adore the main characters in Graceling, which is the first book, and they're not really in this book very much, and I think that's why I rated it low. So I'm hoping coming back to it with fresh eyes, I will like it a whole lot more. And the final library pick is Bloodguard by Cece Robson. This was a pick from my husband. It seems to be some sort of like gladiator time period. Yeah, 100 years, tens of thousands of gladiators, and today only one will rise. So I don't know if I will pick this one up. It does kind of feel like my vibe, but I've never heard anything about this author or this book. So we'll see how he likes it, and then maybe I'll pick it up too. But I love, love, love the sprayed edges on this. So it was 7 books that are either borrowed from friends or borrowed from the library for completely no cost to us. And yet we get to read them, and it's really exciting. So highly recommend going to your local library. I will talk more about why I love it so much and why I think you should too in a minute. But first, in case you're only here to see the books, we'll go ahead and do the rest of the book haul. So now I have 10 books that I have purchased over the past 3 months. And I just want to say all 10 of these were under $35 total. And again, after I show you the books, I'll talk more about how that's possible. So the first book is one that I have read multiple times. I've listened to the full cast audio version twice, and I have read the digital copy once. It's The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. This has a spooky little place in my heart. I feel the itch to read it every October, and I have for the past 3 years, and I'm very excited for this book specifically, again, because it has some beautiful illustrations inside of it, and the illustrations are by Dave McKean, and I think it's going to add a very fun new element to a story that I really, really like so much. So, Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. Jumping genres a lot. Then we have The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Disha Filia. This is a collection of 9 stories spanning 4 generations of characters. And this is something that I have not read before. However, based on the reviews and based on what I've read about this book, I know that it is one that I want to own and to have to lend out to friends if they are interested in reading it as well. So I'm super excited to read this. Then I have what's to me even a fairly boring book, but it was super cheap. It was under $3, and it's the Strengths Finder kind of overview. If you're not familiar with Strengths Finder, it's talked about like a personality assessment, but everything that I've read about it doesn't feel like a personality assessment. And so I really want to dig into this to see how it does or does not relate to the work that I do with teams with the Enneagram, and see if there's anything that I can either bring into the work that I do or relate it to this, because a lot of corporate organizations and businesses really prefer this over anything else, and I don't prefer this over anything else. So I want to convince them and learn why. I want to convince them to use me, but learn why they're so drawn to this and see if I can kind of bridge the gap. So this was picked up more for work research than for fun. Then we have Between the World and Me. I agree with Toni Morrison. It's written on the front of this. This is required reading, is what Toni Morrison said about this. And everyone that I talk to about this book, I tell them that it should be required reading. The way that Coates talks to his son in this book, because it's kind of written to his son and we're getting a glimpse at it, there were moments that it felt so intimate that I felt like an intruder on hearing the story. And I'm just really grateful that he published it for us all to be able to read and see his perspective on, especially the perspective of a father to his son. I'm also very excited to get the audiobook through my library of his new book called The Message. Highly recommend this book. I have wanted to own it for a very long time. Finally found it at a secondhand store and picked it up immediately. Then we have All My Rage by Saba Tahir. This is one that I have not yet read, but again, based on the reviews, based on people that I know in my life who have read it, and based on reading what it is about, I am fairly certain that I am going to want to own a physical copy. Found one under $6, picked it up immediately. She also has a lot of fantasy novels, and I'm very excited to jump into those sometime this year as well. We have The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. I have read this book. I have seen the movie. I love this story. I love John Green's writing. And while I would probably like to own most, if not all of his books, this one has a special place in my heart. And when I saw it for under $2, I had to pick it up. It's also in great condition. Then we have A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. I have read this book before. I think I've probably read it once, 2 or 3 times at this point. But again, I found a book that also has images and illustrations inside of it. And for these short literary fiction books, it just adds so much to see images alongside the words. This is a book that I read for the first time without any illustrations, and it was one that I could see. I don't know how to explain that to you, but when I started flipping through this, images in the illustrations were very aligned with the way that I pictured this home and this story when I read it for the first time. And again, I found it for under $2 and I had to pick it up. The last 3 books are all by Terry Brooks. The first one is The First King of Shannara, The Elfstones of Shannara, and The High Druid of Shannara, Strachan. I have not read any of these books, but my husband loves them. And a bit of a story, I bought him a first print edition, so like a first print run, but not necessarily a first edition, but a first print run of The Sword of Shannara on Etsy, and I think I paid like $20 plus shipping, which is more than I typically like to spend, especially on a used book. But he has been dying to have physical copies of these books, and the covers of the first print editions are so much prettier and more interesting than any newer prints. So I found that one, and then he made it his goal to find the rest of the trilogy plus the prequel, which is The First King of Shannara. And we went into a secondhand store that we really like in Roswell, and he found this, which is also a first print run edition of The First King of Shannara for less than $3. Then the next day we went to a secondhand bookstore in Woodstock called The Sweet Read, and that was our first time in there. But he happened to find the second book in the trilogy, which is also still a first print run edition of this book for less than $6, I think. And then this is not a part of the original 4 books that he really wanted, but he said that this was a standout book for him in the series. And there are a lot of books in the Shannara universe. We picked those up for him. The other ones are mostly for me, but he'll hopefully read some of them too. So again, all 10 of those books were less than $35. I think it was like $34.43, something like that, for all 10 of these books. And then, of course, we have the 7 books, 6 from the library, 1 that we're borrowing from a friend. So we have 17 books, and we paid less than $34 to be able to read all of them and to own 10 of them. So I just want to talk about how reading can be an inexpensive or free hobby. It can be free by one, going to your local library, getting a library card. Lots of states also have online library cards that you can use for digital content like books and audiobooks and magazines even through the Libby app. So if you're not familiar with Libby and you live in the States, and I have heard some people in the UK can use it with their library as well. So look into it at your local library wherever you are. Libby allows you to download digital ebooks, audiobooks, and magazines to read on any reading device that you own. I use my Kindle to read the books. You can also read them in the Libby app. I just find it a little bit more clunky and I don't like reading on my phone. So I send them to my Kindle, but I think you can send them to really any e-reader that you might have in your possession already. And then through the Libby app on your phone, you can listen to the audiobooks. I highly recommend. Like I said, out of 24 books that I've read this year, 20 of them were through my library and 19 of them were through Libby specifically. The only book that I have read physically from the library so far is How the King of Elflame Learned to Hate Stories, and I finished that fairly recently. So I highly recommend checking out your local library, one, for books. We also get puzzles from the local library and we get records and bring them home and listen to them on our record player and take them back. There are lots of books that I've checked out from the library that I would like to own one day, but I got to read them and I didn't have to buy them to read them. And I will continue to search for them, like I did some of these, at secondhand stores and pay significantly less for them than I would have if I just ran out and bought every single book that I hoped to read one day. So that's the first tip. Check out your local library, check out the Libby app. The second tip is to check out secondhand bookstores locally, and even when you're traveling. When I'm traveling, I love going to bookstores. I love picking up a book as a souvenir almost. I often try to pick up a book that has been on my mind for a while or is a book that I've already read and love, and then it holds a special place in my heart because I love the book and a special place in my heart because it came from a place that I traveled to. It also feels fun. When we go to the library or when we go to a secondhand bookstore, we're there for hours because we stand and we read the spine of every single book on every single shelf. It's a lot. We're there for a very long time and it is exhausting. But then you find gems like these books that my husband really wanted. And I paid $20 for the first one and then got all three of these for less than $10. This book, Between the World and Me, like I said, I've been wanting this book for years and I could have just ordered it from Amazon, but it was something about finding this book that had already been read by someone else, and that made it more special to me. And I really wanted it secondhand, and I didn't cave until I found it secondhand. And I paid less than $3 for it. So I highly suggest checking out secondhand stores, seeing if there are any around you. The other thing that is a little bit more hit or miss, just because they are public use and it kind of depends on where you are and what people are reading around you. But Little Free Libraries, I believe that if you go to the Little Free Library website, and if anyone has purchased a Little Free Library through that company, they have a location map on where they are, and you can see if you've got a Little Free Library close to you. We've gotten a couple of books from Little Free Libraries. I have donated tons of books to Little Free Libraries, both here and when I'm traveling, because I often travel with a book, and sometimes I will travel with a book knowing that I intend to leave it behind because I often want to pick up a new book. And to answer the question about, Kaylee, aren't you trying to be more minimalist and don't you identify as a minimalist? Why are you purchasing more books? That's a great question. It's a valid question. The value that books bring to my life far outweighs any stress that they might hold as possessions or clutter. Books don't feel like clutter in our house. Books feel like not even decoration, but it's just more interesting to me to have a full bookshelf than it is to have a shelf full of knickknacks or a shelf full of decor that came from a place like Target or something that has no meaning to me. These books hold so much meaning, and if I own the book means something to me. The book has value to me. And I will continue owning books. Books will continue to be the thing that I probably own the most of as far as items per category goes because of the value that books bring to me. I recently learned that reading is 68% more effective in lowering stress levels than listening to music or taking a walk outside. And that was crazy to me. Because we often hear about people saying, get outside, get into the sun, take a walk. It's good for your brain. It's good for your mental health. And it is. It is, absolutely. But I don't often hear people recommending reading as a form of stress relief. It's more of just like a hobby, or there's a really popular book that, oh my gosh, how have you not read it yet? But I have a very broad range of books that I like. I have a very broad range of authors and topics that I like to read about. And it is so calming. It's what I do when I get in bed for the night. I turn off my phone and I'm just reading. When I wake up in the morning, I try and read a chapter before I get out of bed. And it just sets the tone for the rest of my day. And it often sets the tone for the type of sleep I'm going to get that night. If we get home really late and I don't have time to read a chapter, I notice a difference in the quality of my sleep. And I don't think that's because, I'm so stressed that I didn't get to read, but reading literally calms your nervous system. It's a science, okay? And having them in my home and having access to some of the books that I love so much and want to reread time and time again, or even hand out to friends so that they can get some of the joy that I have gotten out of books, it's worth it for me to have them in the house. I have unhauled plenty of books in my time. There have actually been books that I've gotten rid of in like a spiral of I have too many things that I really regret letting go of. Really regret letting go of. For instance, I owned 2 of the Folk of the Air series by Holly Black, and it's painful to think that I owned them and I got rid of them. And there are books that I bought and read when I lived out of the country, and to save on suitcase space, I didn't bring them here, and I really wish that I still had those books. But I will also gladly get rid of books that don't seem to bring me any value. So to each their own. I will continue to buy books at full price from local bookstores. I will continue to buy books from secondhand stores, and I will continue to read the majority of my books through the library and borrowing books from friends. So I hope if you are a fellow lover of reading that you remember that it doesn't have to be an expensive hobby. It doesn't have to be an expensive stress reliever. It can be free, it can be cheap, and it can still bring you all the value and joy that owning a book for full price would bring you. It's also a lot of fun to do a hunt at a little free library or at a local secondhand store. And it's also a really fun activity to get you out of your house to go to your local library and peruse the bookshelves. I have read books within weeks of the release of a brand new book from my local library. I see a lot of talk from people that the reason that they don't use their local library is because they like to read a lot of new releases and they have to be on hold lists forever. Well, oftentimes, your local library will allow you to get on a waiting list before the book has released. I read Abby Jimenez's new book, Say You'll Remember Me, within the first 2 days after it released because I got on the hold list months ago. So it's possible to read new releases and to read the hot now new things that are coming out and to still do it without having to purchase all of those books. And I just want to say one thing about Amazon specifically, because I am very anti-Amazon, but I do follow a lot of local authors, and they are talking more and more about the hit to their revenue and the searchability of them as authors and their books as products, because people aren't using Amazon as much anymore because we don't like Amazon. But then local and indie authors are suffering because of those choices. And so I always try to find a book by an indie author for sale at full price from a local bookstore. Even if it's not my local, even if I'm getting it shipped from Washington, because that's where it's easier to get it shipped from a local privately owned bookstore. But if Amazon is easiest for you to get your books through, that's totally fine. You can totally use it, especially if you're supporting smaller and indie authors, because it really helps their name get out there even more. I just like to go a little bit further and try to also find a small bookstore to support through that purchase as well. So I hope that maybe that was helpful for you to remind yourself that reading doesn't have to be expensive, or that just from the haul you found a book that you are excited to pick up and read, or one that you forgot that you had read and loved and might want to go and pick up again. That's it for me. I'm going to go dive into one of these now, okay? Until next time.